Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This video will be a first of hopefully many series to come, or many videos to come for the series, and this is going to be called Beatles Buying Guide. And this is pretty much, I'm just going to be showing a specific album, like for this video, it's going to be Meet the Beatles, Beatles Second Album, and Something New album. And I'm just going to kind of tell you what's out there in terms of the pressings of the albums. So this is kind of the stuff that I look for, either at record shows or on record stores, eBay, Discogs, that kind of thing. And I just kind of want to show you what's out there in terms of pressings, just in case you want to know as well. I mean, again, free to collect whatever you want, but if you're kind of a Beatles collector, maniac, nut, kind of like myself, um, this is the kind of stuff I look for. For example, Meet the Beatles and the Beatles Second Album, I've kind of found about 15 major variations. I'm not going to go into like all the very specific stuff, like down to the pressing plant and stuff, because that's too much. There'll probably be like, there's a tons of different versions on Discogs that you can look through. But this is going to be episode one. This was also an idea from one of the subscribers and one of my friends I talked to outside or on YouTube and outside of YouTube. So shout out to him for coming up with this idea. Since I would like to say I do know quite a bit of different variations and pressings at this moment. So I just kind of wanted to share what I'm kind of looking for, just in case you want to pick up anything yourself. You kind of know what's out there. And yeah, again, it's going to be episode one. This is kind of like the 1964-ish albums um, that were originally released in the United States. Hopefully, I'll get through all of the United States albums, and then probably do the US 45s, and then we'll probably move on to the UK albums, and then the UK 45s, and I probably won't go into any like foreign countries, but I might if everyone likes this type of series. Again, this is a longer video for me to make since I have notes up here, and I'm going to be showing you pictures, hopefully through some editing stuff. I do have some physical albums with me just in case nothing really pops up too well on one of the pictures. So I have a couple physical copies showing some different labels and other variations. So like I said, we're going to start off with Meet the Beatles, and the first pressing came out with no credits, has no BMI or ASCAP credits, and there's also no produced by George Martin credit on the back cover. So in mono, there was roughly 20,000 copies made of that, and in stereo, which is a little bit rarer, is about 2,000 copies. And I actually do have a pretty clean stereo pressing here that I picked up on eBay a while ago. The record is in okay shape, just kind of standard, but there is no credit, just the song run times. So I'll put a closer look on the screen here with some pictures. I've pretty much got all these pictures I'm going to show off of Discogs, and I just put them all into like a Word document for myself for kind of my notes, and I'll just kind of screenshot it and put it in here. And pretty much all these 1964 pressings will come in a kind of a dark blue inner sleeve, as shown on one of the pictures there. And so yeah, that's the very first pressing. It's kind of probably well known, I guess, in kind of a vinyl collector in general, is that you kind of always want to look out for the no credits for Meet the Beatles. So that is one variation down. Let's see if I can put these. And then the second label variation, which is still from 1964, it will have the ASCAP credit on every song except for "I Want to Hold Your Hand," which I believe is just the BMI credit on that. And some of these copies, the second label variation, were pulled to make promos from. This particular run, that's where the promo copies came from, and some of them had a sticker telling us a promotional copy. as well, and it also still does not have the produced by George Martin credit on the back cover. Let's even try to get a close up on that, or where it should be, because I believe it should be kind of right in that area there. Um, and later pressings, they will have the George Martin credit at the bottom. So that is the second label variation. The third label variation will have the BMI credit for the first two songs, and on the fifth song on side 2, and all the other ones are the ASCAP credits. Now this one will have the produced by George Martin on the back cover, and some of these were from 1964 to 1965, and I actually have a 1965 copy, and some of the West Coast ones will have a darker olive green Beatles, as the other ones are kind of a tan. So let's see if I can show you where the produced by George Martin credit cover should be. Let's see. Don't think it has it on this particular cover, but some do. I guess some don't. But that's just kind of how it is sometimes. Let's see. Alright, and the 1965 inner sleeve will be kind of like a yellowish kind of inner sleeve if you're into having the original Beatles albums come with the original Capitol inner sleeves as well from 1965. And kind of like the last, I guess, original pressing, I guess you can say, is the fourth label variation, is where the BMI credits are on every song except for the first and third songs on side 2. And again, this should have the produced by George Martin credit on the back cover. And these came out in 1966 and should have an orange Capitol inner sleeve with that as well. Now we're going to go on to the fifth label variation. I think it should be roughly the same as a 1966 label, but the matrix number should have a Rockaway stamper on side 1, and then a Scranton pressing on side 2. So the Rockaway stamper should have an R on side 1, and then the Scranton is a little triangle with the I-8M inside the triangle on side 2. So I don't really have kind of a picture for that, so I just kind of took a screenshot of what the matrix numbers look like from Discogs, that kind of thing. And I believe the 1967 Capitol inner sleeve is kind of like a lighter orange tan kind of inner sleeve. So those are all kind of all the major variations for the original pressed album. So now we're kind of getting into like the reissues and the repressings, I guess. I probably need to figure out what the difference between a reissue and a repress. Probably repress is like happening during the time reissue, happens a little bit later. But anyway, so in 1968, they re-released all the Beatles albums so far with the subsidiarity of Capitol rim text around the bottom of the label, and all the ones before that do not have the subsidiarity of Capitol below the text. So that's kind of an easy way to see if you have a 1968 copy or not. And then 1 year later, roughly from 1968 to 1969, they came out with record club pressings and then also the Capitol on the green label. So the record club pressings are pretty easily identified as well. They will have the 3 dashed lines in the top left corner of the album, and it would also be in the kind of the classic Capitol rainbow label, or it also could be a green Capitol label as well. The matrix or the catalog number on the record should have an 8 kind of in the middle of it instead of an X, I believe. And that's kind of how you can tell also if it's a record club issue. Now, not all green labels are record club pressings. I'll probably show you one that is not, and it should have an X instead of an 8 to where it is. So there you go. So make sure I got everything. And on these record club labels, it should have in the rim text below, it should have manufactured under license below, or on the rim text instead of another subsidiarity. It shouldn't have that. It should have manufactured under license and a number 8 in the catalog number. So that will do it for the 60s. Now we're going to move on to 1971. Now we're on the Apple label. They are reissuing all the Beatles albums on the Apple label now. And the first one has the capital text on the bottom rim text. And those came out in 1971. Let's see what copy I have here. So I have the one reissue, the repress after that, which I'll get into. But I'll show you the one that has the capital rim text. And then from 1971 to 1975, it's still on the Apple label, but it should have the MFD by Apple on the bottom of the Apple. I'm not going to get into specifics on, like, it's on the full Apple side versus the sliced Apple side, because that's just kind of a lot to do anyway. But here's my copy of it. As you can see, the Apple MFD by Apple is on the bottom, and there's nothing on the back. On the capital one, it should have like the capital subsidiarity text on the bottom rim. So let me put this record back in its sleeve. And I should say all 1968 pressings and below and on and forward are all in stereo. So the Apple one was in the shrink here. And the produced by George Martin credit is actually in this corner there. So sorry about that. Okay, and then we have one more Apple variation. And I don't believe I have a physical copy of that. But this one's also a really easy one to tell. This one came out in 1975. It'll have the all rights Apple rim text below. So it'll just be kind of real easy to see. This is kind of a longer green text on the Apple label compared to the short MFD Apple credit. And I believe some of these Apple labels in 1975 are a little bit lighter too, so that can be an easy way to tell. So those are all the Apple reissues. Now we go on to 1976, where we have the kind of the red-orange capital label, and these came out in 1976, till 1978, and they look like that on that label. So there's my copy. And then a couple years later, to 1978, they come out with the purple capital label. And I'm not really going to go into sound quality and all that stuff because that's pretty subjective, and my turntable not really the highest of quality yet. It's still probably a kind of a starter, lower end type deal. So I would love to compare all these pressings when I have a little bit of a better setup. But the cuts by Wally in the Dead Wax are supposed to sound pretty good, and I still think these later reissue albums are more affordable for the condition they're in as well. Because I wouldn't, for a purple capital label reissue of Meet the Beatles in like BG Plus, I would be willing to spend $20 to $25 for that, and it would be more or less in better shape than an original per se, and potentially better sound quality if it's cut by Wally. So that'll do it for the 70s. Now we're going to go into the 80s. We have 3 different variations in the 80s. Now they're going back to kind of I call it the throwback label, because they're going back to the kind of the rainbow capital label. And In 1983, they came out with the throwback label, and there's two variations on the same label. One came out in 1983, and one came out in 1986. So the only really difference between those is that the 1986 version is the Specialty Records press, so it should have like the SRC in the dead wax of the record, and also it is kind of the label itself kind of gives you a hint sometimes of the later one. Sometimes it has a little bit of a wider kind of ridge to it. Uh, some of them do, not always, but it's a good indicator, more or less. And then again, if you want to just check the dead wax, that's going to give you the definite certainty that you will have a, you know, a 1986 compared to a 1983. So I got two copies, the different pressings, and those are usually in very good condition as well, if you look out for that. So now we're on variation 15, and it is the last series that they released the Beatles albums on, and Capitol's going back to a purple label, but it's a little bit different style. And another big clue you can tell what a variation or pressing you have is that this one has a barcode on the top right corner of the back cover. So those are actually getting a little bit harder to find, or they're hard to find, as they came out in 1988 to 1990, roughly. So they're kind of more for, I guess, on the collectibles side. I only have one of those. I believe I have a U.S. help from that pressing, and again, with sound quality, I'm not going to quite get into that. But other than these later reissues are more or less going to be in better condition, you know, give and take, all that. So those are all the U.S. Versions of Meet the Beatles that I kind of look out for. But I'm going to throw in a couple bonus ones that are from different countries, because I like albums that have different artwork or something that kind of neat about them. So for Meet the Beatles, there's one that came out in Japan. Original ones go for a good bit, and I believe it also has a different track listing compared to the U.S. Meet the Beatles. So that kind of gives it something unique. It also has a bright red Beatles on the cover. It's kind of a yellow Meet the. So I always kind of like that cover, and I have a reissue on the Flag series from 1976. And then there's a Meet the Beatles in Mexico, where they kind of translated Meet the on the cover, and it has a pretty cool label. I believe it's on the Mozart label, something like that. And then I also added one from Colombia, which has kind of the same style of photos, but the pictures are completely different. They're kind of more the cartoon painting pictures, which I think look really cool, and it's on a Odeon label from Colombia. So I thought that was pretty cool. Just kind of throw in some other Meet the Beatles that I find interesting or cool to potentially collect. All right, so now we're going to go on to the second album. And again, I have roughly another 15 variations of that, and then something new is a little bit less, I believe around 10. So all these earlier ones have a whole bunch of kind of going back and forth with credits and misspellings kind of early on, but then they're pretty much all the same in terms of 1968 and on. So the first pressing for the Beatles' second album is that there's no running times for I Call Your Name and Long Tall Sally, and then also some early stereo copies. This is kind of like a mispress. Have the time of 2:23 for You Can't Do That, I believe, instead of 2:33. So something to keep an eye out for there. And again, all these 1964 pressings should come with a blue capital inner sleeve. So those are kind of the first two pressings, or the first pressing, a couple variations. And then the second variation, they add the times for I Call Your Name and Long Tall Sally. And then on the third one, they kind of revert back to the first one. They don't have any running time for I Call Your Name, and they also make that a BMI credit as well. And then there's also another misspelling / error where they have I Call Your Name as I Call You Name. So again, be something just to kind of look out for that. If you're going through a record store and you think you already have all the Beatles second albums you could ever want, it's always worth double checking to see if you don't have a misspelling of a certain song title or a certain running time. All right, so variation number 4, we're kind of going into 1967-ish time frame. They go back to having no credits for Long Tall Sally and I Call Your Name, but they still give it the BMI credits. So how can you tell the difference between the first pressing and then a 1976 pressing, or 67? Sorry, pressing is that I believe the stereo is kind of going to be more condensed on the label than other ones from the earlier first pressing. So, and if you have a capital inner sleeve that might look a little bit like a lighter tan, that can also give you some context clues for whether if you have an original one or not. If it doesn't have an inner sleeve, you might want to do some research, just like a quick check, look up the matrix numbers, and kind of just throw it into Discogs and see what kind of pops up for that. But it's good to know to have these things kind of like in your brain. But if you always need to double check Discogs, I always go look for the matrix numbers just to confirm, or I can pair it to see if I already have it in my collection, either from the Discogs collection page, or I do have a spreadsheet, or I have multiple spreadsheets within a spreadsheet, that kind of thing, to make sure what I have and all that kind of stuff. So then pretty much again from 1968, we have the subsidiarity of capital rim text below, and pretty much for all these US albums from 1968 and forward, they're going to have pretty similar reissues because they're just kind of grouped into one kind of series, since they just reissued things on these different labels so they can get more money, I guess. And then for variation 6, we have the record club issue. Again, it should have the 3 stripes in the top left corner, and it should have the number 8 in the middle of the catalog number instead of an X. And again, that is true for both the rainbow capital label and the green capital label. And then we have the standard 1969 green label, which I have here. And again, it should have an X in the middle of the catalog number instead of an 8, if it's just a normal green capital label pressing. Then after that one, we are back onto the Apple series. Again, 1971 should have the capital rim text around the Apple. And then from 1971 to 1975, they switched to the MFD by capital rim text. Again, either on side 1, side 2. It doesn't really matter. It'd still be from that time frame. And then from 1975, we have the All Rights Apple rim text below. Again, pretty easy one to recognize, as you'll just see a lot of lettering, green lettering below. So that kind of gives you a pretty good context clue right away without necessarily have to look it up, because time sometimes is precious when you're going through a lot of records. So, and then we got the red orange E1976 label. Again, all these labels and pressings have sub pressings from Jacksonville, Winchester, Scranton pressings, but I'm not going to go into all that. And like within all those pressing plants, they have slightly different label and song title like configurations. Like some might have a couple songs above the spindle hole, some might be aligned left, center, and right. but I'm not going to go into all that because that would be, I would probably have to spend an hour video just for like one album. So if I'm lucky, I can try to get this video in roughly about 30 minutes for 3 albums. I think is pretty fair. And then for variation 12, we have the purple Capitol label from 1968. And then going to the 80s, we got the same deal of the 1983 to 1986 pressings. Again, in 1986, we'll have the SRC matrix kind of stamp on it, and then also, again, sometimes they have the indentation a little bit wider out on the label instead of closer to the spindle hole. And then lastly, we have back to the purple Capitol label with the barcode, and from 1988 to 1990. And the couple bonus albums I chose here, we have one from Germany, which actually looks like the Something New album cover, but it's the Beatles' second album. Track listing, the kind of the picture configuration on the front cover is on the back cover for the German pressing. It'll be on a white and gold red Odeon label. And then these are always kind of cool. I always think they're really cool, but they're pretty pricey. You got the UK export albums of US albums. So we have the second album. And if you look closely to where the Capitol label should be, it's just replaced by the Parlophone label, and the label itself is on the Parlophone label, the black and yellow classic Parlophone label there. So that was the Beatles' second album. Those first two kind of have a lot of, again, running time mispressings of like titles and stuff. So those are kind of had a lot of earlier variations. But as they're kind of moving on here and Beatles putting out more stuff, there's going to be kind of less and less of that kind of thing for the initial running press. And then there's also, once you get to like the 65 to 66 albums, there's not that much time to repress them until they already get to the 1968 versions. So the more time they have initially, the more reissues roughly they'll have, if that makes any sense to you at all. But anyway, so we got Beatles Something New. Looks like that. And there's a couple different first pressings. One's kind of a misspelling of the German translator as Nicholas with a CH, but it's supposed to be just with a C. So if the CH is the misspelling, the one with just a C is the correct way that it should be on it. And that's kind of, most of them are, because they got corrected in the first runs. But the earlier pressings have, I believe, the misspellings. And again, it should have the blue capital inner sleeve. And then from there, it wasn't really too much until the 1968 subsidiarity on capital rim text. I mean, there might have been some earlier just kind of reissues. I can double check here just in case. I don't want to miss anything. Let's see. I'm just going to take a look at the US on vinyl after the 1964. Yeah, there might be like some reissues from 1965 through 67. Again, it'd just be kind of easier to tell just looking through the matrix numbers instead of trying to find minute small label variations, because they might not look or be any different anyways. So if you're curious what pressing you have besides the first pressing variations, then always again double check the matrix numbers, like on a Discogs. All right, so that was 1968, and then we go back to the record club, and this one I actually do have a record club. As you can see, got the 3 dashes on the top left corner, and it should also kind of bleed on the back cover as well. And this one is on the green Capitol label. As you can see, it has 8, and it should say manufactured under license from Capitol on the bottom instead of a subsidiary um, rim text from 1968. So the record club pressings are probably a little bit more sought after and a little bit more expensive, especially the rainbow label. The green ones are still record club pressings. They're probably just not as appealing or cool. They might be kind of like the second version of a record club pressing. So the black rainbow Capitol are probably the more sought after ones for sure. And then we actually have another variation of the 1969 green Capitol label. On the actual label itself, there's like some added words below the stereo. It should say, or some say, manufactured by Longingness Symphonet stamp. I'll show you a picture. There's about like 3 lines of words added. It almost kind of looks like it's kind of stamped on there. It's just kind of the regular 1969 green Capitol, just with added words, and it actually can bring some added value to that particular pressing. So that is the 60s for something new. Then we go on again to the Capitol rim text from 1971. Then we have the MFD by Capitol rim text from 1971 through 1975. And then we have the All Rights rim text on the Apple label from 1975. Then we go to the Red Orange 1976 label and the 1978 Purple Capitol label. And now I saw this, and this is the only place I've ever seen this information from. Oh, it's the kind of the recent book I picked up from the estate sale, and it mentioned a note saying that there was an experimental marble splash vinyl version of something new from 1978. I couldn't find any pictures of that whatsoever. There was not a release uh, uh, entry on Discogs either, and I looked it up online. I didn't really find any information about it. The only thing it said in the book is that it was very similar to the Canadian Sgt. Pepper album that came out in 1978 with kind of that gray purple marble splash vinyl. I never heard of that before, but if you have some more information, please let me know because that sounds pretty cool to me. I don't know if it ever got out into the public or anything, or if it was just kind of like a one-off thing that they just again experimented with. But if you ever find something like that, I would recommend picking that up for sure. So that was something unique that I learned throughout making this video process as well. So, and then we go into the 80s. We got the 83 throwback rainbow label. Then we have the 1986 throwback label with the specialties pressing, the SRC and the dead wax. And lastly, we have the 1988 purple Capitol label again. I believe some of those might have also the SRC stamp in there, but it also has the barcode indicating in the back right cover of the album jacket. So a couple bonus ones from other countries I wanted to point it out. Nothing really too unique. They usually kept the same cover, but again, we got a German copy here of something new on the white, gold, and red Odeon label. Also, kind of interesting. They have the German sung songs, so probably only right for them to put that album out. Then we have one, I believe, from Peru on the Odeon label, but it's kind of like a black Odeon label from Peru. There's also one, I think, from I'm not quite remembering the country. Let me look it up real quick. another South American country that I thought looked pretty cool. There was Peru, and what was it? And Costa Rica. Costa Rica was on a similar Odeon label, but it's red instead of black. So that was pretty cool. And then lastly, we have another UK export edition, again with the Parlophone label in the upper left corner of the cover, with the kind of the nice strip indicating it's in stereo. And I know this particular export on the Parlophone label, on the black and yellow label, has a lot of misspellings, I believe, and they repress it on the silver and black label as well, kind of throughout the '60s. But any one of those versions are again pretty sought after and have some pretty good value as well. So that is all the information I have for those albums for what I look for. Let me know if you like this series. Again, it takes a while for me to gather gather all the information, and then also put the pictures into these videos. So if you want to see this series continue, please let me know, and I'll continue to do them. If not, I can try to find another series to do. But if you're interested in kind of the different variations of kind of what's out there, that's going to be very similar for the U.S. albums, um, in terms of like from again 1968 and onward. But a couple albums have some interesting variations that are kind of like one-off type deals. Like the White Album being on white vinyl, and I believe Revolver and Yesterday Today um, is on a red Capitol label, but that's in the same style as the green Capitol label, and those are really rare. So I'll at least try to do another episode next month, hopefully doing kind of the 1965 to, yeah, probably 1965 albums, probably like Beatles. Let's see, Beatles 6, Help, and Rubber Soul. That might be another good set of three there. But yep. So I hope you had your pen and paper out, take some notes. Again, I try to put up as much pictures as I could, and I pretty much found all those pictures on Discogs, and just kind of took a screenshot. So those pictures are out there and available. You just kind of need to know how to go through Discogs pretty well to kind of find the exact pressings. But once you get used to it, it can go by pretty easy by using all the filters on the computer. That's kind of what I do. So I hope you learned some good information today. I kind of enjoyed going through all of it as well, just to kind of give me a refresher of what's out there and kind of what I want to look for in terms of U.S. pressings. So I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next episode, episode 2, 1965.